Welcome to a realm where personal growth meets expansive spirituality and where we're not just scratching the surface. We're diving deep, widening our perspectives, and having a darn good time doing it. This is the Enlightened Podcast, and I am your host, Jen Hamilton. You'll enjoy an infusion of motivation, empowerment, and inspiration that will resonate in every aspect of your life. Expect captivating stories, heartfelt musings, and my own personal experiences. But that's not all. I'm bringing awe-inspiring individuals to the table, so get ready to meet some remarkable souls whose wisdom and stories will leave you spellbound. No topic is off limits here. Brace yourself for raw authenticity, unfiltered vulnerability, and yes, the occasional splash of explicit language. We're delving into the realms of the esoteric, mystical, and the woo-woo, unafraid to explore the extraordinary. So if you are ready to venture beyond the surface, to explore the depths of your soul, and to awaken the magic of life, if your heart says yes, then hit that play button and let the Enlightened Podcast guide you on this remarkable expedition. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Enlightened Podcast. I am your host, Jen, and today's very special guest is Dr. Saloni Surah. Dr. Surah is a published author of her first children's book, Flora Investigates, The Case of the Missing Gold Eggs. This is a funny, zany book for 5 to 9-year-olds. Her second book, The Last Fairy Guardian, is due out early next year. She's also a HIV and sexual health consultant and has a PhD on HIV infections and drug use. She has worked with marginalised populations from all over the world. Working in her particular area of medicine, Dr. Surah became acutely aware of the mind-body connection with regards to ill health and well-being. She also has an active interest in meditation, self-development, and other healing modalities, and also works as a spiritual coach using EFT and energy work. There's not much this beautiful woman can't do, and I'm so excited for you to hear our conversation. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, Saloni, and welcome to the Enlightened Podcast. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you? It's lovely to be here.
I'm very well. It's great to have you here because we are going to dive into some epic topics today. I'm so excited for this. Tell us all about what it is that you do and what is your magic to the world.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Well, I'm a mishmash, so I'm going to be open about that. I don't really fit in a box. So I'm an author. I've published my first book this year. My second's coming out next year. Currently just kids, but I will be moving on to juicier adult stuff. I'm also a doctor, or have been for the last 20 plus years, a consultant in HIV and sexual health. And funnily enough, I worked in Brisbane many years ago at the beginning of my medical journey at the Prince Charles Hospital. And I'm a coach too. So I started coaching, 7 to 8 years ago. Don't do so much of it now, but open to the right clients at the right time.
Yeah. Amazing. And what is it that led you to moving out of being a doctor in the medical field and becoming a coach and author? Tell us about that journey.
Okay, yes. So it is a funny one. I mean, I've always been interested in alternative stuff and meditation and self-development and all of that. And funnily enough, it was doing a PhD. So I did my PhD in 2010, or started in Dublin in Trinity College, and it was a PhD in HIV and drug use. And basically, I was running a HIV clinic for people who injected drugs down in one of the methadone clinics and looking at clinical and cost outcomes. So it was a costing PhD, but it gave me the freedom to manage my own time. So, my exams were over, my out of hours, well, I still did some to pay the bills, but I was able to manage my time and do courses and take time out. So in that time, I started to write. And I also started to do some coaching stuff. Namely, it was kind of tapping and crystal work. And I started following this woman called Margaret Lynch. So she was a big tapping guru in the US. And she's got this video on YouTube about tapping for $50,000, which is probably why I started following her, because who doesn't want more money, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I ended up going to her retreat. So I was moving back to London. My 3.5 years of 3 years of PhD were over. Had another 6 months of training left in London. And I wanted to go to the retreat, and I thought, well, this is crazy. I can't fly to Boston from London for like 3 days for a retreat. So I put it out to the universe and said, look, if I'm supposed to go, I will get a free ticket to this retreat. So I ended up buying her book and getting a free ticket, and it just flowed. I booked the retreat. I went. I found it quite triggering. So I spent a lot of time in my hotel room going, oh my God, everyone's American and they're all coaches, and what am I doing here? In I might have been Boston, the Hilton or whatever. Anyway, and I ended up signing for her 1 year program. Didn't realize I was going to. I stopped in the toilets, and some random woman held me as I cried. And I then signed up after that. You could do another 2 years. And part of that was a Tapping into Wealth program, which is a program that she's done for money, looking at money blocks and money programming and, the money map and all your beliefs around that. So I thought, well, it'd be silly not to do it. I got it for free. So I did the training and did swaps and then just started using it. But essentially, it gave me a framework for how I could do coaching, I think, essentially. So I started doing other stuff. So it was funny. I've been updating my website this week. Haven't put it on yet, but we'll be having a coaching section, and it's quite hard for me to quantify exactly what I do, but it's a mishmash and it's individualized and it's really what people need. So I've done love stuff, I've done money stuff. Last time it was before my second child was born, and I ended up working. I was really lucky to work with a whole family, so it was nice for me that it was the parents and the children. Because I missed working with teenagers or younger adults from a medical point of view. I always used to find it quite fun. So yeah, it's totally whatever comes up, whether it's ancestral or past life. And I do a mixture now. It's not just tapping, energy work, pendulum work, dowsing. It's whatever comes through.
Wow. And what a contrast, though, to being in the medical field.
Totally, absolutely. But it's probably what made me a good doctor, because, people would just come in and talk to me. And, there's been plenty of times that I've had patients in front of me and I've gone, there's something not right here. I'm just going to do this. And, is that a sixth sense? Is that psychic ability? We all use it day to day. And you do it and you go, oh, right, yeah, okay, they have got a brain bleed. It was a good idea I did that or whatever. And you can't quantify exactly why. These things, or people walk in and you go, they've been sexually abused, or this one's had some sexual trauma in their life. Yeah.
So you can feel that energy from them as well, almost like medical intuitive.
Yes, I can, and sometimes I can feel. I've opened up a lot more, especially since my children have been born, and since I've healed from a PTSD. But sometimes I can actually feel like the heartbreak or the emotions that's sitting there. Now, I always was able to do that, but I've had patients that come in and they've seen loads of people, and I'll just sit down sometimes and I'm like, what's really going on here? And they, that just opens the doorway sometimes to, they're not there for the physical. There's something, emotional underlying this that I've not told anybody or that they're scared about. But yes, sometimes there is that slight crossover with the medical intuitive bit.
And so are you still practicing medicine?
I'm on a break at the moment, so I'm not sure long term. So I've had my children and I've had a bit of sabbatical, and I'm just seeing how things pan out. So I'm not 100% sure right now. We never say never. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And so what are you finding, through your coaching experience now? Like you mentioned, you're branching into working with people around love, or, it could be around, wealth blocks. What are you finding that, people are really feeling, I guess, collectively in the world at the moment? Like, is there perhaps a common theme that you're noticing with people coming through your door, that there's an energy around?
I'm not doing any coaching at the moment, but certainly I'm feeling in the collective with what's coming up for me and my family is there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear around money and the future, and I think certainly how we make money and how we used to make money is changing, and that relationship with money and the energy around it. I think there's a lot of ancestral stuff coming up, so it's literally like, for me, the last 4 or 5 years, I've had to clear everything. So those bonds from the past, and especially as now I've become a mother, I don't want my children clearing that stuff. That's my role. I want them to be free to live their lives without those bonds that I had. Um, you know, I think men too. I'm seeing it with my husband, that slow kind of awakening, but it's a bit more challenging for them because it's harder for them to find that space. Now, my husband isn't a man who he gets on very well with women. He's quite soft, feminine. But certainly, I remember I was doing HIV testing in the prisons back in Ireland a few years ago, and some of the guards were there, and they wanted to go and do Pilates. They were married guys. They played the guitar, were very sporty, and I remember them saying he used to go to Pilates or he tried it, but it was just full of women, and he didn't go back. So I think the last thread that I'm seeing a lot is that it is like the men that are coming through now, like those of us that have children and are married. It's like the men are having to come through now, or they're getting left behind because
Yes.
you become a mum, things change. The children do take over, but as they should, because you're their mum and they should be that. But it's like the men are having to catch up now, to bring the families together is what I'm feeling collectively.
I was having this conversation with someone recently, actually, on the podcast, and Paul was his name, and we spoke so deeply about, especially the masculine and the feminine. He's in a space of, this beautiful embodied masculine and just honoring the feminine and saying, like, women, we need you. We are watching you step up. We're watching you change. We're watching you download all this wisdom and use your intuition, and we're stepping into more of this feminine space. And us men are being left behind because you guys are almost outgrowing us. And I'm seeing that so much in my field as well, is that I'm seeing women. I work predominantly with women, and I'm seeing them leaving their relationships or outgrowing each other or going their separate ways, because it's almost like the men find their ceiling in their growth, and there's not enough support for them to be able to break through that, or there's still stigmas to break through, or, as you were saying, there's a lot of ancestral stuff, which we'll dive into in a moment. And Paul and I sort of bounced off each other, asking, like, what do we need? Like, as a feminine, what do I need from the masculine? And as a masculine, what does he need from the feminine? And it was a beautiful way that we were able to see what it is that we can co-create as, divine feminine and masculine together in this world, because what we've been doing thus far is not working for us anymore. We can tell that. We can tell that we're growing, we're awakening, our eyes are opening, and things are changing in the world, and they have to change. It's natural evolution. And as women, we can't do this on our own. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
we need the men to hold the space for us. Like, we can create revolution. That's in our blood to do so. And we need to be held in that space too. We need to be held and supported and provided for, so that we can go out and do this work. And I think this is why it's so important to be having these conversations, so that we can remember that within us, remember why we came here, remember why this cosmic joke has, had us incarnate at this time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny you say that, because in kind of my family, the men are the feminine side, and I think for a lot of us women, certainly in my own career, I had to be masculine, and it was actually one of the issues with me with finding a partner and having children. In that, what had got me successful with my career, or what the way I had to be successful in my career with the exams and this and that, didn't work with attracting in a mate. And I'm finding, even with my children, the male side is often the softer, more feminine side, and that in itself is tough for them as they go out into the world, and as you mother them, because I want my children to be uniquely them, and it's about finding that space for them to be that.
Yes, exactly. Like, we want to cultivate them to be their fullest expression of their authentic selves, and to really harness what they came here to do as well. And we're seeing we've seen a shift in gender roles definitely in the last few years. And one of my, I guess, my favorite sayings is equal rights, different roles. So we all have equal rights. I'm all about equal rights for women, all about equal rights for men. I don't think that's even a debatable topic anymore. Like, it shouldn't be a debatable topic anymore. There shouldn't be any gaps in any of that. But I definitely think the roles are shifting. And I used to, absolutely, hand on my heart, like, I was the one that would pride myself on working so hard and being the independent white woman, I don't need no man mentality. And it got me to a point where I was just experiencing hyper independence. And then I would almost be quite intimidating towards men. But at the same time, I felt as though I didn't have any other choice. And not only that, in my family system, I modeled what was reflected to me from my parents. And my father was, not that he was a feminine man, but he took the feminine role. He was the homemaker, and my mum was the one that worked and went to university and was the breadwinner. And so modeling that behavior and then looking at family systems and family constellations, being the second born, I'm the download of my mother. So the firstborn is the download of the father. The second born is the download of the mother. So I've taken on all of her belief systems, all of her values, all of her ways of being. So to stay in rapport with her, I had to model her behavior. This is all subconsciously. And by doing so, the agreement that I essentially made with her to stay in rapport with her, to be validated by her, was to be like her. So it was, okay, so the woman has to be the breadwinner. The woman is the one that does it all. Finding also, like, reflecting my father, emotionally unavailable at the best of times. Okay, so that's what we look for in a man. Initially, like, if I look at, my previous partners from very early on in the dating game from when I was 15, I look at how like, my first boyfriend, alcoholic, didn't drive, didn't work. And that was my father from when I was a young age, So it was very much like, how do I stay in rapport with my mother subconsciously? Oh, we have the same thing to bitch about in our relationships. Like, throughout my basically, before I had my own business, my entire adult life up until my, early 30s, when I was working, I always worked multiple jobs. Because not only did I have my main full-time job, I always worked an additional retail job or a waitressing job or something, to just make sure that I was the one that was able to live by myself and buy myself everything and be completely self-sufficient. And then, when dynamics started to shift and I started to get into relationships, it was like, well, I have to out-earn this person. I have to do all of the work. And it was almost like I was giving off the impression to the masculine, like, I don't need you. You can come here so far, but I actually don't need you. And it's definitely been a wake-up call to realize these roles that we play in society and the deep-seated things that we've inherited through that ancestral lineage to give us this belief systems. Because my mum just didn't decide that she was going to be like this. She had to learn it from somewhere. That came through her heritage. She's Italian, so there was a lot of deeply ingrained stuff within her cultural background as well, and her family system. And so, through no fault of her own, it just is what it is. But until we start unpacking that, we don't actually see it for what it is.
I totally agree. I mean, I have very similar stories with men in relationships and with my mother. And I've spent a long time trying to work on the ancestral stuff. And I see it in my husband. My husband's also Italian. And it's certainly not a legacy I want to pass on to my children. But it defined me in my 20s and 30s. For me, the issue was I was single and I desperately wanted somebody. I wanted children. At one point, I didn't think I was going to have them. And there was that grief for that. But I was the same, very independent, used to earning my own money. But it was enough, but not too much. So, I was growing up in this Asian family, and it was all like, know your place. And little girl, money is not for you. So you can earn money, but you can get to a point where it's not more. And what they used to do in this family years back was they would marry the sisters, the girls off, to less well-educated men. So they would keep them lower and they'd get them to come back as servants and do all that. So there was very much this know your place, and money is not for you. And you see this, like, when you look after some of the communities that do the FGM, it's that the women are worse. It's the women that take the girls off to have this done, and often it's the women in these families, in my experience, that are the worst perpetrators of this.
Mm.
Um, and yes, to survive, you have to put up, shut up, and recreate, because that's all that's modeled to you. So I was the same. I had that with relationships. You know, didn't think I was good enough as a consequence. So attracted in partners who reflected that to me. And I took my time then after a while, because I went, I'm clearly the problem here. It's not them. I could sit here and, argue the rest of my life about it, but it's not going to get me what I want, which is ultimately a partner and children.
Mm.
And so I took the time out and did attract in a different partner, but it came back again with in my case, a very bad work bullying situation. Again, reflecting back, you're not good enough, and the not being supported, and then the financial issues that came with that, with ending up with PTSD and being off sick. And it's taken an awful long time, to see things clearly, to work through it, to process some of that anger. I mean, I remember going years ago to Dublin to a workshop with a Reiki Wicca guy, and he said, "Gosh, you're really angry." And I was like, "Am I? I don't think I'm angry." That was that ancestral rage that was just in me,
Yeah.
that had just been passed down, and also with me, that anger at men that my mother
Mm.
had, and that all the other women had that been passed out. And I remember being with my husband, and sometimes I'd just be really angry with him, and I'd be like, "Why? He hasn't done anything." And I'd have to stand back and go, "Is this my anger? Was this coming from somewhere else?" So there was a lot of transmuting that in various forms. I've tried everything: Reiki, astrology, one-to-ones, numerology. I've been doing a lot of pendulum work lately, and actually, funnily enough, last week had an Akashic record woman with this wonderful woman in the UK, which I feel like has finally, hopefully, put that nail in the coffin. I've been chipping away at it. And I do my own ancestral clearing stuff, but it's layers, isn't it? It's layers of the onion that just keep on coming back because it's been so deeply embedded. For me, when I had my own children, I mean, I wanted to do it for myself, but when I had my own children, I was like, this is not happening. I'm not going to sit there and watch, what I see in families is, brothers and sisters pitted against each other, mums and daughters pitted against each other, aunts and uncles, or aunts and nieces not talking to each other. This is not happening. And I don't, the only way I found to deal with it is to just disengage from the family, which is not great, but it's not happening. It's not carrying on. And having discussions about it, even though my children are quite young, of, okay,
Mm.
we don't do this, or we do this, so this is why we're not seeing this person as much, or this is where we are. Because I think the more open you are about it at an earlier stage, it just brings it into the light. I think with a lot of these things, it's pushed into the dark. It's like a dirty, guilty secret, And it's something that I saw also at work with the sexual shame that got passed down with women that had been raped or assaulted, or adults, that have been abused as children. That shame gets passed down to their children. If it's not processed, if you don't work through it, if you don't clear it, it gets passed down, and you see that sexual trauma, even though the children haven't had it. It's just passed down, inherited from the parents. And so you would see that. I saw that a lot. A lot of poverty. So, a lot of individuals that really grew up with nothing, and families decimated by HIV and drug use in Ireland. So it was devastating, really. Hence why I switched and started writing kids' books and doing a bit of coaching, because I was like, with some of these, it was real. It wasn't that I didn't enjoy it, but it was like, this is never going to change. This individual is going to be in every week or every 3 months in a revolving door until they come in dead with an overdose, or the HIV's got them, or something. So there has to be a better way. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. There's like you said, there's so many layers to it, isn't there? You know, it is like the onion. And I think once you start as well, you get to be on this journey of unraveling. And it doesn't mean like, and I always try and tell people this, especially when they're at the start of their coaching or their healing journey, or, you know,
Mm.
unearthing all of their parts really. You do a bit and then you can take a break. You do a bit, you can't just stay in this cycle of having to unravel all of the layers, because you'll just be consistently in this like existential crisis going, what even is my life? I had a really incredible experience. It was my first ayahuasca ceremony a few years ago, and I felt all of the pain, all of the energy of my ancestors behind me moving through me. And it was the pain of oppression. It was the pain of just being so shackled. And I just felt myself tearing these off and saying, we are not okay. And just roaring, like I was the loud one in the ceremony, just roaring so loudly that we're not okay as women. We are done with this way of being. We're not doing this anymore. We're not like, I can't even believe that FGM still exists. For anyone listening wondering what that is, that's genital mutilation. I can't believe, like, it's so hard for me to comprehend that this still exists. You know, and there's so much more, like, you know, there's trafficking, there's so many things that still exist in our world, and just because we don't see it doesn't mean that it's not actually going on. And what we need to do, like, a lot of people ask, like, what is it that I can do to help? I don't understand, like, what impact would I have? And I always say to people, work on yourself, get through your own stuff, you know, do the work on yourself here, like work on that ancestral line, so that the generation moving forward isn't coming in with the same shit that we came in with, because we need to break down these shackles. We need to create change. And it's our generation as parents now, you know, with younger children coming through, we need to show them that it gets to change, it gets to be different. And it's such a powerful thing to do.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it just takes one person and one no to start that. That does ripple out. And again, talking about it, or certainly, I'm not going to pretend this isn't happening. I'm not going to pretend certain behaviors aren't abusive. I'm not going to pretend. I'm just not going to pretend, and that can be hard. And in my case, I've lost, a lot of friends and, family members. But I'm not somebody who can sit there and pretend. Abuse is abuse, whether it's the family member or not, whether I love you or not, it's abusive. I'm not going to pretend. Um,
Mm.
so it's challenging, but like you say, that working on yourself, and it does ripple out. My children, I'm sure, like yours, they're different. They know that no, nobody's allowed to do this to me, or we talk about it. And I've had my children demonstrate something so beautifully to me that had happened to me. So my next book that's coming out, and it's not to sell my book, but it's a book about a flower fairy and a human girl, and it's at a time when the fairy forest is at risk, and wings are at risk. And it's really a book about having your wings clipped, and how we all have our wings clipped, and how often it's done by people who are supposed to love us, and we let it be done because how else do we survive? And then that power of, getting them back and the forgiveness. Well, I witnessed this with one of my children. The wings were back, and it was beautiful and also terrible, because I was like, that happened to me for my whole life. It's taken me to 40 plus years to get those wings back.
Mm.
And I had to, because there was no other way to survive, which is just devastating. So, I weave these themes in my books, that they're very magical, and there's, fairies and flowers and potions, but there's also these deep themes of having wings clipped, which essentially is what it is. For me, it's been a dramatic impact on my finances of boom bust, but never going above a point, and not having that freedom. And I've had it very clearly illustrated to me how it's dangled and how it's used to control me.
Mm.
And again, the last 2-3 years, I've had to say no. But I mean, it brings me all the sadness because it didn't have to be like this. I didn't have to struggle for all these years. And I didn't need to have a really gross relationship with money where I was like hoarding it or wanting it, but not allowing it in, and just where it was used to control me, and
Mm.
it's just it's a shame. It shouldn't be. It should be a beautiful thing where, I give you something, you go, that's wonderful, you give me something back in return, and it's flow, and it's a positive thing where it's then it passes on and we use it to do good, not, well, you're going to be a benefactor or this or that, so I can do what I want to you. No.
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually, do you know what I want to circle back around? Tapping to 50K. Did you get your 50K from tapping?
Did I get my 50K from tapping? I can't even remember now. That was like 2014. I mean, on my term, I probably did with earnings. So, I was like, I want 50K tomorrow. She's got two, so 50K part one and part two. I mean, I think um, it was a clever move on her part because it got a lot of people into tapping and watching her. And, the money work, it's not about money. It's about the ancestral stuff and the family trauma and the financial trauma and, hidden agendas and all of that stuff. And your programming, the money that
Yes.
you earn, the debt that you have is a direct consequence of your mind and your thoughts around money, not this is the money, so these are your thoughts. You create that. So it was a very smart move on her part. So I think probably, but not, I was like, yeah, I want to win 50K tomorrow. I don't think that happened. I think I earned it in the normal way. And like I say, I've had an up and down relationship with money the last few years, but I've really seen how it has been used to control. And not in a good way. And I'm very careful with how I talk about money with my children. Yeah.
And tell us about, like, what is the type of stuff that we see when we do this ancestral healing and this ancestral work? What are some of the things, I guess, that sort of come up, especially, like, let's talk about wealth, because that's sort of the topic at the moment. What are some of the things that you notice that you had to work through, even some of the tangible things? Like, what was some of the programming that you discovered that you had no idea that was there, that was actually one of the blocks?
So financial trauma was a big thing, and it's often a big thing for people where, as children, maybe your parents lost a job or there's been financial hardship. And also, the money programming. So, I was functioning with my parents' programming around money, and money was hard. They were always struggling. It was basically the ruler. And you then often grow up with two things. So you have this boom and bust cycle where I'm not going to be anything like them. So I'm going to earn and do really well, but then you bust because you then start to battle because it doesn't seem it's too good to be true, or you can't quite hold on to it because you've still got that mindset. Or the other bit was that, well, why should I get it if my parents never did? So you stay true to that, and then you never quite succeed because suddenly if you become massively abundant, then you don't belong. And in a lot of families, and I've seen it, with mine and with other families, people don't want you to do well. So you don't fit in, and it brings up a lot of jealousy. And or, family members have stolen money or taken things, or you can't trust them with it. So it brings up a whole bag there with money and the control. Certainly in my case and in other families, the control or the toxic money. And toxic money is money where there is a battle or it's been used to control you. And it's literally, you can go from 100K in the bank to it just gone because it's just toxic. So it's tricky. Didn't expect to be talking about money today, but yes, that certainly was a big thing for me with the ancestral stuff, relationships, and my self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Yeah, there's so many layers to it as well, like especially if we've got a lineage of poverty as well, or
yeah.
like the deep-seated conditioning. Where would you say, like, if someone's listening to this going, I feel like I've got money blocks, or this, I mean, this could ripple out into other areas of life as well. But if someone wants to start doing work on any, ancestral healing, what does it look like to even start that journey?
I think the first step is clarity. So going, oh my gosh, I've got an issue here. I need help. Because I think once you say that and you open yourself up, the right people come in. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's the clarity and it's talking about it. And there's loads of different people that you can do Akashic records, you can do tapping, you can do ancestral stuff, you can do money stuff. But I think just having that clarity and speaking about it opens up the doorway to magic and miracles. Like I remember about 5, 6 years ago, I was like, I want to be mortgage free. That was my intention. I am not in the house that I expected or in the way that I expected, but it happened. So I think setting those intentions and opening that space up and going, I need to work on this really does bring things in if you're open to it. There's a couple of things you can do. So Margaret Lynch has that Tapping into Wealth book, and that's a book, and there's a lot of stuff online about it. She doesn't necessarily go into the ancestral things, so she does deal with some of the family stuff, but like certainly in my case, I had done all that. I'd worked through it multiple times, but it was only the last year or two where I really got clear on the ancestral money control and the female ancestral money control and how I had recreated that, and how it was literally like a ball and chain around my neck of, no, enough, but not too much, and know your place. It's not for you. And that's been stuff I've done myself, but lately, kind of working with others, so some Akashic record work.
Yes, it's so powerful, isn't it? And I find this with, I'm a past life regression therapist. And so, and when we do go sort of, between lives, we sometimes can drop by the Akashic records and have a little sneak peek and see what's going on in there as well. What do you find is the way in which people can best do it? Like, do they sit in meditation, and do they call in their ancestors and have a conversation? Do you follow sort of particular journal prompts to be able to sort of dig into the ways in which that conditioning has existed? What's the way in which you discover even what those blocks are from the ancestors, or do you have conversations with family members about it?
So there's a lot of different ways, and we're all different. So in my case, it was meditation, and it was hard to see it. And 10 years ago, I wasn't able to see it. It's taken a lot of deconditioning and a lot of space to get into the headspace to see how it really does affect me. And I'm starting to see that with my husband now, and his ancestral stuff. Um, so it's a funny one, and I think we're all individual. I think meditation is really important because I think if you've got a clear mind and that space, and things pop in. And again, talking to my husband about this, it's something that I encourage all clients of having that quiet time, and that I've tried to do with my kids and breathing. Um, I think there's a knowing, isn't there? We get a knowing of this is the next thing to do, or this is the next thing to try. I mean, I do past life stuff with people as well. I don't do Akashic record stuff, and I do ancestral stuff. But there's so many ways it could be done, which is wonderful. It's not a one size fits all of you've got to do it this way or that way. I've done tapping work on it. I've done past life stuff myself. I have done pendulum work myself, stuff myself. And stuff with others, and shamanic work. So I think it's not a one size fits all. And it might be a cop out, but even as a doctor, I'm very much not one of those doctors that like one size fits all. Everyone's individual. We all have to do things our own way, and what works for me doesn't work for you. And only you can know exactly what is right. And sometimes we try things and they don't work, and that in itself is a process and a journey. So those supposed failures aren't really failures. It's all a learning thing, and it's all a step forward. So I think, again, for me, the first thing is clarity, taking the space and time, meditating and journaling, and setting the intention. Because when you set intentions, you find the right people, or the right people for you at the right time. Because who's right for you now may not be right for you in 2 years' time.
Yes, I was going to circle back to that. Like, the power of intention is everything. And when I don't think some people realize just how powerful intention is, because when you hold that feeling of intention, you are literally creating a frequency that is going to call things in and have things drop away, which are aligned to that frequency as well. And I have seen it so much in my own life. And this is, I mean, this is manifestation, really. It's intention.
Yeah.
And I saw this even, must have been about 18 months ago. I was thinking to myself, I was holding the intention to connect with a new coach for myself, and one that was like played in the spiritual and woo woo space, but like really grounded, could show me everything that I needed at the time, support my business. Like, it was a business coach, like everything that I needed. And all I did was hold the intention. And then out of the blue, I ended up having a conversation with a girlfriend. I said, "Oh, look, I'm on the lookout for a new coach, and this is what I'm after." And she said to me, like, she'd just started dating a guy, and she's like, "Oh, his sister is an incredible coach. She's actually got a program coming up in a few days, like just a 1 day thing if you want to jump on that." Well, I jumped on that, and then I jumped on the next one, and then the next one. And then, lo and behold, we were in France together earlier this year on a Mary Magdalene retreat. Like, it was just
Mm.
so aligned and so connected. And like, you can just like the energy between us. It's like we're from the same soul pod, And all I did was hold the intention that this is what I want from a person. This is what I want to work through. This is what I want to receive from that. This is what my
Yeah.
investment can be. And I went from there, and every single time I worked with her, it was always a full body fuck yes. It was always like, whatever the investment was, it doesn't matter, because I'm in constantly reinvesting in myself, and, just always holding the intention that we're right where we are, like right where we need to be, and that everything is working divinely, perfectly aligned. And we get to just play in that space. We get to just hold the intention that we are going to receive all that is we want to receive. And like you said, the power of meditation and just dropping into that quietness and just allowing that openness. And one of the things, I'm actually also journeying to become an author. I'm co-authoring a book at the moment. And it's been an incredible experience because there's a lot of coaching involved in that as well. And there's a lot of blocks, because like the topic that we're writing this book on, it's called Wild Eros, and it's around sexuality and spirituality, and it's almost quite a taboo topic. And so writing about, what's in us and bringing that forward, like that is a journey within itself. And I was holding the intention that I wanted to write a book, and then it just sort of dropped into co-author this book, and just all of these, magical things happening. And, and through this process, what I'm finding is how much I'm learning about myself and what's coming out of me through that. And so, the more that we hold the intention that whatever needs to come through will. And one of the magical parts of this process that I'm doing through, writing this book is automatic writing. And I love it, so whether it's a topic or whether it's just completely open, is just sitting there with the page and the pen and not thinking and just writing. And it is such an incredible practice. I'm a huge fan of journaling. Usually I've got a reason to journal, or I'm just sort of due to
Mm.
journal, and it's a way to open up all the containers of the compartmentalization in my brain and go, okay, what's real for me right now? Let's take all of the lids off these containers. Let's get it all out there. What is it that I need to work through? What do I need to acknowledge? What lid needs to go back on and, put at the back of the brain for a little while? How am I feeling? Like, big feelings check, all of that kind of stuff. But automatic writing is just so different. I find it such an intuitive practice. And some of the things that have been coming out through that is just like, oh, wow, I didn't even know I had that in me. So I think, there are so many powerful practices that we have access to that can help us on this journey.
Absolutely. I mean, I've forgotten about automatic writing, so I'm going to pop that down because I need to get my husband to do that. Yeah, I think also, we're so busy all the time that quietness and meditation is even more important now because,
Yeah.
certainly when I was growing up, there weren't like screens all the time and Wi-Fi everywhere and all of this. It was quieter and simpler. And now it's just it's kind of continuous, isn't it? You know, of phones and messages and emails. So it is even more important to have that quiet space. I was actually talking to my husband about meditation and different ways, you know, because he's kind of starting out. And I was like, well, you know, some people do candles, and I used to sit and hold a crystal because I love my crystals. But I remember chanting and going to, you know, retreats and all of that stuff. So it's really funny. It's not a one size fits all at all, which is wonderful too, because you know we all appeal to different people, and who works for me doesn't necessarily work for you or for him or for the person down the road. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And look, that there's so many ways in which you can do it for yourself, or you jump on YouTube and do tapping courses and all sorts
yeah.
of things. And but there are also people like us, coaches and support people to help you break through those barriers too, or guide you in the right direction. Because as coaches and therapists, that's what we do. We're here to help, but you don't always have to invest in someone to be able to do that. You can definitely start out, and then there's people like us where we've got training in these modalities that can support you to go even deeper with it. I've got quite a number of, like, some of my online courses, like we do some really sort of deep inner work for mother healing and father healing, and releasing all that we need to, that we've been carrying around on, very unconsciously on behalf of our loved ones, because we were programmed to do so.
Oh, we came into, yes. I mean, it's funny. I was writing down, and I had this reading last week, and I just find I'm a change agent. So I have people that come, they work with me often for a short period, and they disappear, which is great. And then sometimes they come back, and sometimes they don't. But actually, that's great. It's great that they don't need me anymore. You know,
Yeah.
it's great that they've moved on and they're happy and successful. And often I find it's a short period, but my challenge is I find it hard to define, because I do what needs to be done, and it needs to be a right fit. Um, you know,
Yes. I definitely found that as a coach as well. Like, everything that I do is so broad. Like, there's so many different aspects of what I've packaged essentially into coaching. It's like coaching and hypnotherapy and past life regression therapy and NLP and theta healing and Reiki and all of the things. And it's like, how do you put that into human words as to what you do? And and then we're coming up against marketing and SEO and all of the different pieces of it. Like, it's so funny. I was talking to someone recently, and I was like, I signed up to be a coach through these modalities. I didn't realize I was signing up to be the marketing manager and the content creator and the chief financial officer and the chief operations officer and the booking agent and all of these things, especially, when you work for yourself,
yeah,
you end up wearing all of the hats, which I do love it all. It's just so time consuming, but I love every part of it. Like, I love that I get to align with my purpose. And one of the things I've found, through being a coach for so many years as well, is that I've really discovered that what it is that I actually do. And I was doing it, the programs that I would run, or the people that I would coach, I didn't actually realize, but what I was helping them do was discover their true purpose and go and live in alignment with that, because they've broken down all of these shackles of conditioning that says you can't have that, or
yeah,
you can't do that. And it was only recently, like, it really dropped in for me. And it's so funny. I rang one of my most beautiful friends and mentors. He's been in my life for about 6 years, and we talk on the phone most days. And I said to him, I'm like, oh, I think I've got it. Like, I think I found, my niche. Like, I help people find their purpose, and, you know, and I'm going to market it that way. And he's like, well, duh, that's what I tell everyone that you do anyway. Like, can't you see that? And it's so funny, because I'm usually so broad with things, because I want to help people on every
mm,
level. But what I've realized at the end of the day, what I'm really good at is helping people unlock their purpose and their passion. And we get to go through this journey of complete deconditioning to get there. And that's I guess where I've always loved doing things. And then, funnily enough, a few weeks ago, a beautiful friend of mine has just stepped into doing natal charts, so astrology. And she's like, hey, I'm working with, like, how you read your North Node and South Node. Do you want to have a reading? I was like, yes, absolutely. And it was literally in my chart, I can't think, not 10th house. I don't know much about astrology deep enough, but whatever house it was in,
mm,
was like, literally, you cannot fail if you do the work that you're doing now. Like if you're helping people discover their purpose and doing this. And I was like, oh my God, that's why this, like, it literally gives me life when I'm doing it. It gives me energy. I never ever feel drained from doing my work because I just love it so much. And it's so cool because I've had to go through so much deconditioning and reprogramming and shackle breaking to get here as well. Like I didn't just step in and be like, this is what I do and it's easy.
Yeah.
There's been many a times my head has been in the bucket through ayahuasca ceremonies. There's been breakdowns and breakthroughs. There's been really hard conversations. There's been speaking my truth even when my voice shakes. There's been creating boundaries and having really freaking tough conversations with people because I need to speak my truth. There's relationships that have ended. There's friendships that have ended. It's just been incredible, but this is my life's work to support other people in this. And you sound very similar in what you do as well, Saloni.
Oh my God, you're just describing me. Absolutely. Yes. I mean, so I do slightly different modalities. I started with medicine because, it was funny when I started coaching, it was the same feeling in a way. It's that same feeling of when you help people transform their lives and you don't quite know
Yeah.
what it is. But, I suppose I don't have as many certifications that way, but I've heard everything. Like people tell me about murdering people. So for me, sometimes I think it's people just being with me and talking to me,
Yeah.
or that gives them space. But I've also taken a slightly different modality in writing. My astrologer said to me 13 years ago, he was like, I tell a lot of people not to give up their day job, and I tell you, you should do and write. He's like, you've got a funky imagination, but I write about those big themes. My first book, it's a 10-year-old detective who's looking for a missing gold egg laying chicken. But it's really, and there's flying pirates and flying boats and dastardly hunters. But it's really a book about a girl going for her dreams. And for me, it's really about inspiring children because I looked after so many adults who must have had terrible childhoods. I felt alone a lot as a child because I didn't quite fit in or belong. I never have. And I was different and intuitive and psychic and had to hide all this stuff. And I've spent so much of my life doing that. But, if I can help people dream and believe and know that there are people out there, then that for me is the thing. And it's not only for the kids, I've had a lot of adults read it. So there's different ways of doing it as well. But absolutely. And for me, I agree, the boundaries is one of the hardest things, especially I was having this conversation with my husband, when people have been used to you not having boundaries because, you were brought up that you couldn't have them and people have been used to you not having boundaries. It's really hard. It can be really challenging to put them in place and it can be really challenging to speak your truth and your voice. But it does get easier. That's what I keep saying to him and to myself. It gets easier. Every time I do it, it gets easier. Every time you do it, it gets easier. And it is easier if you're working with somebody, if you've got somebody supporting you. So I used to joke and say, I have to pay for support, because there is nobody else. And sometimes that would make me really sad. And then I'd be like, at least I've got that support.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true, isn't it? I've been the same. It's like, and sometimes I don't want to do things on my own. And not always can your partner hold you in that space. Like it sounds like your husband is on the journey with you, but he kind of sounds like fresh meat to it as well. Like he's
Yes.
quite fresh to the journey, which is beautiful that he's on that journey with you. And I've had very similar in relationships as well. It's like I can have like the beautiful men that I've had in my life have been so supportive, but sometimes it's not the depth that I need. Like I go quite deep with a lot of things. And so, yes, I have had to outsource support or, work with, my beautiful girlfriends that can hold me in that space. And it's okay to outsource that as well. And sometimes like you want to just pay someone to outsource it to, and then that's their job. And then they just take it away and it's all done kind of thing. Like it's
kind
not,
of cleaner then,
that
it's not a yucky thing with a
exactly.
friend or, what's the deal? Also, let's be honest with you, like, we're not supposed to get everything from one person. That
Exactly.
probably Disney
Yes.
idea of having a man and it being like this and that's amazing. No, I don't expect my partner to give me everything. That's not for him to do.
Yeah.
It's not for me to do. There are things he needs to do on his own. There's things that I need to do on my own. And, the same for my children. There's things, they're their own people. They need to do their own
Yeah.
people, and they will have their own people.
Yeah.
You know, so it's different kind of relationships, I suppose, to when we were growing up, or what was modeled to us, and
Hmm.
as to what's norms. Because yes, I
Mm.
couldn't be everything to him, and I certainly wouldn't expect him to be everything to me. We have his conversations. He's like, he works in co-working. Sometimes he's like, I'm so glad I go to co-working, and I'm like, yeah, me too. I'm like, me too.
Yeah. 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 And one of the things that I like to ask people that come on to the podcast, especially that are in the coaching or facilitating space, because I always find that some people put us on pedestals. And because we have the tools that can support other people, there's sometimes an assumption that we just always have our shit together, which is so far from the truth. So I'd love to know, Saloni, what's something that you're working through, perhaps on a personal level, where you don't have your shit sorted?
Oh my goodness, there's so much stuff that I don't have together. And you know what? I'm not one of those coaches that's going to pretend everything's perfect the whole time. I had this woman that I knew in Ireland, great feng shui coach. It's always amazing. I was like, I want a bit of reality. What don't I have my shit together at the moment about? I'm on a learning journey with my books. I had psychics tell me, first time I went to Australia, psychic said to me, you're going to be a big author. It's not happened as I thought it would. I ended up self-publishing. I didn't think I would. I've been in it for 13 years, gone through the agents. That was my decision. And, like you, marketing, all this stuff. I'm learning, and I'm not amazing at social media, and I'm starting it, and I'm doing it, and I'm not amazing at selling either. That's reality. But I'll be open and honest about it and say I'm trying, and it's been tough, and it's
Yeah.
challenged me, and it's been emotional, and um, that's where we are.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And in the art of transparency, I like to share as well, because I had someone actually recently say to me, I was supporting her moving through a bit of a grief journey, and she said, "Oh, thank you so much. I look up to you so much." And I said, "Please don't look up to me. Like, get me down off that pedestal. Look across to me." Because I look across to everybody in my field as well. There's no one that I look up to. I look across to them. And I think it's so important that we remind people that that there is no separation between us. I've been moving through literally this last couple of days. We're recording this in November, but I've just been moving through a really, really deep grief journey as well. There's been a loss in my family, and just really, really just being and walking alongside with the grief. And one of the things that I'm noticing is that grief isn't the opposite of happiness or joy or pleasure. Grief gets to coexist with all of these things. There is no spectrum that it's on the opposite end of. And so I was really sort of mindful. I'm like, do I show up on social media and share that I'm working through grief at the moment, or is it such a private journey that I just want to keep it to myself? And I had a post, like a story ready to go, just to kind of share, not in too much detail, because I really wanted to honor the privacy of what my family was moving through. But I wanted to share and be really transparent about that. And it was interesting because I actually had a moment where I shared, and then I was like, oh, should I have done that? Should I have shared the depth of that? Because are people going to think, oh, she's not okay to be showing up for work, or she's not okay to be recording
Yeah.
podcast interviews if she's grieving? And just really breaking down some of that stigma. And so I had to do the work around that myself, because yes, I've experienced grief before, but this is a different level of grief as well. This is a different experience that I'm going through. And so that's one of the things that I'm working through at the moment.
Yeah, grief's a tricky one. I hear you about that, and I'm going to show you something. I'm not selling anything, but I did a bit of Vedic art when I was pregnant with my first child, and I painted this a few years ago, and I pulled it up earlier this year, and I looked at it and went, "Oh, that's my grief." And one of my friends was like, "It's beautiful," but I agree. You can still be grieving and live and enjoy things, but it's always kind of lurking, isn't it? It's a tough journey. I've experienced a
Yeah.
lot in my life too. It's a tough journey, but it also can be quite beautiful. And the other thing for me is I didn't think I was going to have children. And I grieved that, and I did have them, and it's still challenging. And it was not the start I thought I was going to have. It was a really bad start to being a mother. And I was not in a good place. But it is just that wave sometimes that just catches you when you're most unawares or not expecting it, and it just takes your breath away.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? And grief is just a whole consciousness, really, isn't it? And it's such a big part of life, and it's funny because there's no part of it that I'm resisting either. And so, being able to share it and show up, authentically on social media with it, because I share a lot of my life in my stories. Like, there's a lot of people that know what's going on for me, and I'm, private in definitely some areas of my life, but I like to be open and transparent because I also like to have people know that I'm a real human as well, because there's definitely been times because, perhaps I appear quite confident to people, or it might seem from the outside I've got my shit together, or that, I practice conscious parenting and conscious relating and all sorts of things. I want to break down that stigma of that, as leaders in our field, or as coaches or facilitators or doctors, that we always have our shit together. So thank you for being so transparent about that. And for anyone listening to the audio, you have to go and have a look at the video on YouTube to be able to see the painting that Saloni held up for me. Before we wrap up, Saloni, your book and your upcoming book, tell us all about that. So how can people get a copy of that as well?
Oh, great. Well, I'm gonna flash. So this is my Flora, and this is my 10-year-old detective who lives in Italy. It's loosely based on my husband's friends and family. I've parodied them all. But it's really a book about a girl who has a dream, and it's really a book about anybody reaching for their dreams and not giving up. And it's, when you buy my books, they're imbued with magic. It's not just a book. It's overlaid with something. So this is available on Amazon, so you can buy that worldwide. If you're in Australia, there is a lovely indie bookseller in New South Wales, Get Lost in Books, and he delivers worldwide. He's got 2 copies of mine. They're only for the Australian market, though. My second book hopefully will be out February, March, which is an older. So this is 5 to 10. It's more of an early reader. The second one is an older middle grade fairy book. That again will be on Amazon, and that again will be ebook and paperback too. So yes, I've just had a 2-day free promo, but that's just ended. But it is on Kindle Unlimited at the moment as well. So if you want to give it a try, have a look. Yeah.
Amazing. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. So, Lena, before we wrap up, I have one final question for you. What is the meaning of life?
I think it's love and joy. For me, as I've gone through a very tough couple of years and come the other side of PTSD, it's love and joy. There's good points and bad points, but for me, it's really love. And, my family are wonderful, and I didn't think I would have them. And I've found a family where I belong, so it's that connection and community as well. Increasingly, I'm connecting with wonderful people all over who I may never meet in person, but it's so heartwarming to feel that connection and to know that I'm not alone, and that I make a difference to people even just by being there.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me. What an enlightening chat this has been. I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you so much for being part of the Enlighten podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope you love the Enlighten podcast, and the biggest compliment you can give me is subscribing to this podcast, sharing it, and leaving a rating and review. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. My handle is @JenHamiltonOfficial, and the podcast handle is enlightened_podcast. You can also find the video version on YouTube on my channel. Just search Enlighten, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Have a beautiful day and enjoy living the enlightened journey of life.